Hello everybody and welcome to this tutorial where we're going to be talking about how to read from the application properties file in a Spring Boot application. So more specifically, how to read the specifically defined value that we define in this file, how to read it and use it in the Spring Boot application using the value annotation. So in order to start this tutorial, what I've done here is I've created a basic empty Spring Boot project with currently just one dependency with the Spring Boot Starter web dependency in the project. So the goal of this video is to demonstrate how to read our own values from the properties file. Now the application properties file is a file found in a Spring Boot application that is used for configuration parameters for our apps, or configuration properties for our apps, or let's say like DB connection strings, maybe some secrets for some APIs, and those kind of things. In this also, it's also used to configure, let's say if you have some sort of library that requires some configuration, that usually can be done via the properties file. Now this application properties file does come, or it can be in the .properties format or in a YAML format. In this case we're using the .properties format. And what are we going to do in order to start? The goal of this video is going to be to add our own custom value in this file and then access that value via the application. For the demonstration purposes, I'm going to create a simple controller where I'm going to get the value from the properties and I'm going to return it to the user so we can demonstrate that we actually got the value. So in this case, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a test property. So I'm going to go and I'm going to add a test property and I'm going to set it equal to a test value. So not very simple, we just added a test.property that is equal to this test value string. And what we're going to do next is I'm going to come to the package here of the application, and I'm just going to add another package that I'm going to name web. So basically I'm just going to add another package that I'm going to name web, and in here I'm just going to add a simple controller. So basically I'm going to name it the test controller. And I'm just going to annotate it with a REST controller annotation. So just a simple REST controller. And what I'm going to do here in the controller is I'm going to add a variable. So I'm going to add a private string, and I'm just going to name it test property in this case. Now by default, if I were to run the application like this, and if I were to start the application like this, the value, actually there's not going to be a value assigned to this variable, but basically this is going to be null. So the test property is going to be null by default. Now the goal here is to add this property value to this variable here. How shall we do that? So the way to do that is by using the add value annotation. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to add the value annotation, and I'm going to add a string here, and that's going to be basically a $sign. And in brackets, we're going to put the path towards that application property. So in this case, that's test.property. So I'm just going to copy it, and I'm just going to go in the controller, and I'm just going to paste it right here. And what's going to happen right now, because we're specifying the $sign in the brackets and the path where the property is found, so the test.property, Spring is going to know to look in the application properties file for this specific value here, or let's say for the key. It's going to find this key that it exists, and it's going to take the value and it's going to assign that value towards this variable right here. So this variable right here would get the value of this property. And in order to demonstrate that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a simple mapping here, a simple get mapping, that I'm just going to assign a path to, let's say like get property or something like that. And I'm just going to make it so it returns a response entity of a string in this case. Get property, I'm going to name it. And just simply what I'm going to do is I'm going to return a response entity .ok, and I'm just going to return the property, test property. So very simple. So now what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to start the application and we're going to see if it works. So I'll go here, I'll just start the application, then we'll go in the browser, we'll go to the route and see if that thing is successfully working. So we're in the browser right now, and what I typed out here is the localhost 8080 port 8080. So that's where the app is going to be locally running currently. And I just added the route get property that we defined in the controller. So now when I do this get request, we should expect to get the test property value back. And I'm going to do the get request, and as you can see, we are getting the test value right here. So this is coming from the properties file right here. Now, in order to see that that's actually happening, or to make sure that that's the case, I'm just going to change the value in the property. I'm going to add a 2 here, and I'm going to restart the application right now. And we're going to go back in the browser and see that that value has changed. So the application has started. Let's go back to the browser and let's refresh the page. And as you can see, when I refresh the page, when the new value got fetched, we are getting the test value 2 back. So that's again getting read here from this properties file. So that's kind of how do we read from the properties file using the value annotation. So that's going to be all for this tutorial. Bye bye and see you until the next one.